Okay, so I'm going to take you through the four phases of tissue healing. So, one thing to stress here is basically what I'm going to go through is just our current understanding of what we think goes on during the process of tissue healing when you had a wound. So a lot of what we know at the moment is sort of like close to the reality of what's going on, but there's a lot more research to be done in this area to really have an appreciation for the understanding of tissue healing. The four phases I'm going to go through are overlapping, so they don't kind of have this linear numerical process, but I'm going to go through it as if it was like that for the sake of an educational purpose. So the first phase is what we call hemostasis, otherwise known as the bleeding phase. And basically, this can take between 4 and 8 hours, depending on the severity of the injury and also the location of the injury. So the more vascular the place of injury is, the more blood there will be, for example. So if I injure like an organ or like a muscle, there's going to be more blood there. Where if I injure like a tendon or a ligament, then there may be less blood there, which may slow down the actual process of healing. So anyway, the first stage of the healing process is called hemostasis. And in hemostasis, is when, let's say for example, I have like a cut on my forearm here. As soon as I get the cut, I'm going to go through the bleeding process. And so I've got blood coming out of the wound. So what the body will do is it will start to go through a process called vasoconstriction. And what vasoconstriction basically is it's going to be the narrowing of blood vessels. And the body does this as a nerve impulse, but also as a muscle impulse. So the muscle walls of the blood vessels are going to contract, making the blood vessel itself more narrow. So the reason why the body does this is because basically if you've got a narrow blood vessel, you're going to have less blood getting through that blood vessel. So you're going to have essentially less blood leaving the wound. So that's why the body goes through that process, vasoconstriction. While you've got vasoconstriction going on, because now we have less blood going to the site of wound, we're going to go through a process called hypoxia. So hypoxia is basically when living tissue starts to have a decrease in oxygen. So because now we have less blood going to the wound, to the tissue that's damaged, it's also going to have less oxygen going to it. So it's going to have a decrease in oxygen, which is the process of hypoxia. While we've got hypoxia going on, we've also got a process called necrosis. So basically, necrosis is the death of living cells in living tissue. While the necrosis is going on, we're going to also have what's called platelet adhesion. So at this point now, we've got the narrowing of the blood vessels. What your body wants to do then in response to this injury is it wants to start to send platelets to the area to actually plug up the actual wound. The reason why basically is because it wants to, you want to reduce the amount of blood you're losing. So this plug essentially is going to go onto the wound to stop the blood flow. So it's very similar to, let's say you have like a water hose and you've got the water going through the end, but then you've got like a leak somewhere and then you've got the water coming out as another part of the hose. So what you want to do is you want to get like some Gorilla Tape or some duct tape, put it over the leakage area to prevent further leakage so all the water can go in the right direction and not leak out. That's kind of what the body's doing there with the platelets, is basically making that little barrier from the external world into your body. So finally we have thrombin. So what thrombin basically is, thrombin converts soluble fibrinogen into insoluble fibrin. And the process is to basically make the platelet plug, stronger. So it's almost like it's like a web system over the wound, which increases the strength and longevity of the actual plug. And obviously you want this so the plug does a good job with in regards to keeping the blood in your body. So that is hemostasis. So the next phase, phase 2 of this whole process is called inflammation. So inflammation is between 2 or 3 days and to a couple of weeks. And basically the first stage of inflammation, and actually the process or the purpose of inflammation is to clean the wound. So inflammation is like a real, what's the right word? It's a necessary part of the healing process, and the purpose is to clean the wound. So the first stage of inflammation is called histamine. So the purpose of histamine is to basically prepare the body for it being clean, the wound for being clean. So what histamine does is it basically starts to, it gets into what we call the endothelial cells, and then all the endothelial cells is that lines your capillaries, and that causes the capillaries to separate and go further apart from each other. So the reason why we want this, the reason why we want the capillaries to go further apart from each other and become bigger, is because we want to create room for other cells like macrophages and phagocytes to come in and start to eat and absorb the bacteria that came in through the wound and is at the site of injury. So the idea is to basically clean it, absorb and eat the bacteria, so then later work can be done for the repair. So while you've got the macrophages and phagocytes doing that, we're going to move into the third phase of the tissue healing process, which is called proliferation. So proliferation takes about, 24 to 48 hours, and then somewhere between 2 and 3 weeks to happen. And the first phase, or the first stage in this phase, is called fibroplasia. So basically, fibroplasia is the process where we lay down fibric tissue over the wound. So we want to make the wound stronger, right? So what we do is we have a type 3 collagen, which is weaker than type 1 collagen, but we put the type 3 collagen over the wound to increase the tensile strength of the wound. Because type 3 collagen isn't quite as strong as type 1, in this phase, you really want to make sure that you're not aggravating that area of injury, just so that collagen can be laid down properly and not disturbed, just so that process is done effectively and proficiently. So once the fibroplasia is happening, we have another process called angiogenesis. So angiogenesis is basically where we start to, we've got a bit more strength now, and hopefully the area is cleaned in the wound. And so we're going to start to produce new blood vessels from pre-existing blood vessels. While we've got that going on with the blood vessels, we've got another section called fibroblast. So basically, fibroblast is the new layer of collagen again over the wound, and that again is to improve the strength of the wound and the quality of tissue at the wound as well. So that was the final stage of phase 3. And then the final phase of the tissue healing process is called mature, or the remodeling phase. And this is about 3 weeks to a year. So the final phase of the healing process, the purpose behind it is to decrease the fibroblastic activity, increase the organization of new tissue, decrease the water content, and decrease the blood flow, and then have a resume basically normal cell activity at the damaged tissue. So the interesting thing about this phase is it's normally a phase in physical rehabilitation that is ignored a little bit too much, because once you've got the new tissue down, the body is going to start to produce type 1 collagen, which is the stronger type of collagen. And to really have like a good quality tissue repair at this site, you want to actually expose the wound to a little bit of stress. And the reason why is because if you expose the wound to a bit of stress, then you're going to have a stronger tissue. And the reason why you want to have stronger tissue is to try and prevent injury in the future, right? So you want to have a little bit of stress put on the tissue, and that's going to basically make the collagen stronger and be able to resist forces from a variety of directions. So that is basically the 4 phases of tissue healing. And again, they're overlapping, and this is also kind of a very brief overview. It goes into much more detail, and there's still more research to be done in this area. But yeah, thank you for watching, guys, and I'll see you soon.